So good evening, friends. Meeting again with the organ of medicine. And in last lecture, we have finished up to the aphorism number 57. We have learned the concepts of allopathy, the concepts of the isopathy, vaccination, and its comparison with homeopathy. Hahnemann explained over there regarding the antipathy is the only palliative mode of treatment developed by Galen, and palliation is always followed by an aggravation as a rule. But it is the only pathy which is followed in allopathy, where there is some correlation between the patient's symptoms and the medicinal action, even though it depends as a contrary or contrary skew. Second important thing which he has explained is related with the isopathy developed by William Lux based upon equilibrious curvature, but not thoroughly proved nor not experimented, only a speculated science never came into existence. The third one which came into existence was the vaccination, and which is still very importantly used over there. But vaccination, many a times people consider the vaccination is based upon the homeopathy, but it is not based upon the homeopathy. Vaccination is always based upon one principle, that's where the similimum opposes the similimum, which is not the concept of homeopathy. And that's why there is a difference between the vaccination and the homeopathy. All those three things which we have discussed in yesterday's lecture, let us go ahead with the 50th aphorism. And these further aphorisms, there are many more examples either of a antipathy or isopathy he has mentioned over there. So we'll start with the 58. What he says regarding it. If in the estimating the value of this mode of employing medicines means antipathy, we should even pass over the circumstance that it is an extremely faulty symptomatic treatment. Underline symptomatic treatment. Short note for those who are exam going or those students are there, it is symptomatic treatment. And when Hahnemann explains about single symptom or symptomatic treatment, you have to write down about the antipathy. Because it is antipathy is always symptomatic. You have to consider one of the symptoms for which you have exactly opposite action, and that symptom is treated with the help of that. It is an extremely faulty symptomatic treatment wherein the practitioner devotes his attention in merely one-sided manner to a single symptom. Again, single symptom, underline short note topic. Both of these are related with the only one symptom of the patient. So if the patient has a totality of 8 to 10 symptoms, but one of the symptoms for which they consider the remedy, they finds it out a remedy whose action is exactly opposite to that symptom. Consequently, to only a small part of the whole, whereby relief for the totality of the disease, which is what the patient desires, cannot evidently be expected. We must, on the other hand, demand of experience if, in one single case, where such antipathic employment of medicine was made use of in a chronic and persisting affection, after the transient amelioration, there did not ensue an increased aggravation of the symptoms, which was subdued at first in a palliative manner, an aggravation indeed of the whole case. So what he is saying, when you treat with such antipathic measure, there is only one thing which can happen. The symptoms might subdue for some time. They might get palliated for some time. But palliation is always followed by an aggravation. So patient comes to you again in an aggravated form. So for example, a patient who is treated for the constipation with the help of purgative, the patient feels better immediately after the action of purgative. But when the action of that medicine vanishes, the patient develops the constipation, and which is of a severe character. And this is the rule. This is what happens generally when you deal with antipathy. And every attentive observer will agree that after such short antipathic amelioration, Aggravation follows in every case without exception. Although the ordinary physician is in the habit of giving his patient another explanation of this subsequent aggravation and ascribes it to the malignancy of the original disease, now for the first time showing itself and to the occurrence of quite a new disease. So if the patient comes again with the aggravation after the palliation, there is a habit of the physicians to tell them that now this is because originally disease was malignant, originally the disease was strong because of which this has happened. These are different reasons they used to give when they uses the antipathic principle. Hahnemann says this is a common thing which happens when you try to suppress or when you try to palliate the thing. The palliation is always followed by an aggravation of the original symptom, and that's why the patient who was suffering from the pain, and if you have palliated it by some analgesic, the when the effect of analgesic disappears, the pain always increases, and this is very common when you use the antibiotic measure. There is a footnote related with this, and you have to. There are many examples he explains regarding this footnote, regarding this antibiotic measure. So we'll just go with that. What he wants to explain in the footnote number 64. So little as physicians have hitherto been in the habit of observing accurately the aggravation that so certainly follows such palliative treatment could not altogether escape their notice. A striking example of this is to be found in J.H. Schultz's diseases, the name which is given in German. Whole paragraph is in German language. And at the end, in like manner, J. Hunter on the venereal disease says that wine and cordials given to the weak increase the action without giving real strength, and the powers of the body are afterwards sunk proportionally as they have been raised, by which nothing can be gained, but the great deal may be lost. See what he wants to explain over there. He explains over there. There is one example. There are people, they have the habit of taking the wine, and they consider that wine gives the strength. Because of wine, they get the confidence, they get the strength. But generally, if you observe clearly, closely these patients, after the action gets vanished, they become so weak, debilitated, and the strength is totally lost. This happens quite commonly. Those who are the drunkard, who are having the habit of partaking the beer or alcohol, for time being, they have the strength. At that time, they are in a different world, and the way they are expressing, they expresses, they curses, they fights. It is temporary increase in strength because of the direct primary action of it. But as it vanishes, they goes into such a debilitated state that it is very difficult to arouse them into again into the live lane. Yes. And this is the common example which he has explained. And there are many more examples he has mentioned regarding the antipathy, and those are mentioned in 59. And 59 is whole aphorism. He gives the many examples of antipathic measures. So we'll just read those. It is very easy to understand. So aphorism number 59. Important symptoms of the persistent disease have never been treated with such palliative antagonistic remedy. Without the opposite state, a relapse, indeed a palpable aggravation of the malady, occurring a few hours afterward. So when you give a palliative mode of treatment, temporarily patient feels better, followed by an aggravation. For a persistent tendency to the sleepiness during the day, a physician prescribed coffee, whose primary action is to enliven, and when it had exhausted its action, the day somnolence increased. So one example of the coffee. There are many people who used to take coffee for getting fresh for time being. Yes, it works time being because that is the primary action of the coffee. Coffee being a drug remedy, it stimulates the mind, and it temporarily person feels very happy, very fresh after taking the coffee. But when its secondary action starts, patient becomes more and more dull, more and more sleepy. So this is the first example. Second example, he explains, for frequent waking at night, he gave in the evening without heeding the other symptoms of the disease, opium, which by virtue of primary action produced the same night stupefied dull sleep, but subsequent nights were still more sleepless than before. Second example, it was a habit of using the opium in the people. There were those people who used to work for a whole day. uh, for their children, they used to just um, give the small amount of opium to their children in the morning, and children used to get whole day sleep. And when they returns home after working, the child wakes. And this was the old habit of giving the opium to the children at that time, those who are workers for their children. This has an instantaneous effect. If the person is not able to sleep, they give the opium derivatives. For example, a compose which contains the diazepam is a opium derivative, or alprazolam. This is the recent one. All those acts, when you give it, it acts instantaneously. It used to produce its effects instantaneously, but it never persists. Temporarily, person goes into sleep, but when next subsequent night comes, the person becomes more sleepless. So this is what happened. Third example he gives: to the chronic diarrhea be opposed without regarding the other morbid signs, and the same opium, whose primary action is to constipate the bowels, and after the transient stoppage of the diarrhea, it subsequently becomes all the worse. So this is one more example which he gives over there. The opium, which has a capacity to produce constipation in primary action. So for the diarrhea, they used to give the opium, and next day the patient becomes absolutely better. But when the action of opium disappears, the diarrhea ensues again in aggravated form. The third example. Fourth one, violent and frequently recurring pains of all kinds he could suppress with the opium for but short time. They then always returned in a greater, often intolerable severity, or some much worse affection came in their stead. Opium is also called as an analgesic remedy. It is morphine which is given to the cancer patient, is the opium derivative. It is again a drug remedy. So person feels very happy after taking morphine tablet. And when the effect disappears, he asks more for again for the morphine. Because the pains which were relieved after taking the morphine gets aggravated later when the action of morphine disappears. So another example of the antipathic. For nocturnal cough of long standing, the ordinary physician knew no better than to administer opium, whose primary action is to suppress every irritation. The cough would then perhaps cease the first night, but during subsequent night, it would be still more severe. And if it were again and again suppressed by this palliative in increased doses, fever and nocturnal perspiration were added to the disease. So another example he has given regarding it. Opium is the remedy, very important remedy to suppress the cough. There are many more derivatives. Codeine is one, and this is the medicine which is commonly used in allopathy. Codeine touch, codeine. Then there were many preparations, and people becomes very happy after taking codeine because it used to produce a typical sensation inside the throat, a cooling effect over there, and immediately irritation stops. And second important thing which happens because of this codeine, they gets habitual to it. The when the action of codeine disappears, the irritation used to found it again and cough starts. So they takes one more dose of codeine, again happy. And this happens, this goes on, and person becomes habituated to codeine. Later on, these persons suffers from the night perspiration, the weakness, the cough saturated inside lung, can lead to the thesis, can lead to the tuberculosis. So palliation is followed by the suppression. Another example he gives, weakness of the bladder with consequent retention of the urine was sought to be conquered, conquered म्हणजे to win, जिंकणे, was sought to be conquered by the antipathic work of cantharides to stimulate the urinary passage, whereby evacuation of the urine was certainly at first effected, but thereafter the bladder becomes less capable of stimulation and less able to contract, and paralysis of the bladder is imminent. Another remedy which is used in homeopathy, cantharis, but here they used to use it in material doses. And when you give it in material doses, it used to produce the primary action over there. And under the primary action of cantharis, it used to stimulate the bladder, urine get passed. So person feels happy with the first dose of cantharis. But when subsequently next day, when the action of the cantharis disappears, the bladder becomes again full, never able to evacuate, and there is a threatening paralysis of the bladder can develop. So another example of the antipathic measure he has mentioned over there. Next example he gives us, with large doses of purgative drugs and laxative salts, which excite the bowels to frequent evacuation. It was sought to remove the chronic tendency to constipation, but in secondary action, the bowels become still more confined. So, if the patient who is having constipation, they give the purgative, immediately bowel becomes very easily passed. But next time, when action disappears, the patient becomes more constipated. The another example he gives, the ordinary physician seeks to remove the chronic debility by administration of a wine, which however stimulates only in its primary action, and hence the forces sink all lower in the secondary action. Some general practitioners, they have habit of telling the patient that you feel weak, na? Take the wine. This is their, and person feels happy, and person feels happy he got the good doctor, because he feels that this fellow has mentioned take the wine. He is happy after taking the wine, but what happens after taking the wine? Temporarily he feels elevated, excited, but as the action of wine disappears, he becomes more and more debilitated. One more example he explains over there, by bitter substances and heating condiments, he tries to strengthen and warm the chronically weak and cold stomach. But in secondary action of these palliatives, which are stimulating in their primary action only, the stomach becomes yet more inactive. So he has given two more things, that condiments. What are condiments? Condiments means which are the substances which stimulates your taste inside the mouth. Lontso, pickles, they are the common things which are used as a condiment. So temporarily it feels, it brings the taste to your mouth, but it never persists. So if you have a habit of taking the condiment, it remains temporarily useful. So it never works for longer time. Another example he gives, long-standing deficiency of vital heat and chilly disposition ought surely to yield to the prescription of warm baths, but still more weak and cold and chilly to the patient subsequently become. So one more example of it he has given. If a person feels too chilly, one asks him to take the warm bath. Yes, he is happy after taking warm bath, but after half an hour or 1 hour, he feels more chilly. Severely burnt parts feels instantaneous elevation from the application of cold water, but the burning pain afterwards increases to an incredible degree, and the inflammation spreads and rises to a greater height. So this is a common thing which is used or asked in allopathy. What do they do? If the person is burnt, they ask to put the burnt part in the cold water. Person feels very happy after putting it in cold water because sensation becomes benign. But as he removes it from it, Later on, the burning starts, and that burning is in an aggravated form. One more example, he explains, by means of the sternuary remedies. Sternuary remedies म्हणजे there were many people who used to use what it is called as, I don't know exactly in Marathi. It is snuffles which used to produce the sneezing. तपकीर म्हणतो आपण मराठीत, त्याला तपकीर म्हणतो. त्याला इंग्लिश मध्ये काय? Snuffles or something word is there. When a person takes that near the nose, they immediately start sneezing. So that is the sternuary remedies. He has used the word for that. By means of sternuary remedies that provoke a secretion of mucus coryza with the stoppage of nose of long standing is sought to be removed, but it escapes observation that the disease is aggravated all the more by these antagonistic remedies in their secondary action, and the nose becomes still more stopped. This is common thing. These people used to feel better after using that, and the person starts watering, and the blocked nose gets open temporarily with that, but it never remains. After some time, it becomes more blocked. Same is true when you use the local decongestant drops. There are many people who used to get a habit. Before sleeping, they used to put the drops, Otrivin drops in the nose. Or there are few people who are addicted to the Vicks. They put the Vicks inside nose. There are people who used to use the tiger balm or the amrutanjan, all those things. It temporarily, patient feels better for that, but it is palliative effect. Another example he gives, by electricity and galvanism, which in their primary action greatly stimulate muscular action. Chronically weak and almost paralytic limbs were soon excited to more active movements, but the consequence, secondary action, was complete deadening of all muscular irritability and complete paralysis. This is a common thing which is done in allopathic practice or sometimes in physiotherapy. They used to stimulate the nerves by giving the electric currents over there. And patient feels better because it is direct current which has been used. But it never remains persistent. Afterwards, the same thing happens and it becomes more and more weak. Another example he explains over there, by venisections, it was attempted to remove chronic determination of the blood to the head, but they were always followed by the greater congestion. There was one habit to cut the blood vessel and remove the blood. Temporarily congestion is relieved, but it never remains persistent. Immediately it is followed by more congestion. So it is not a treatment. Ordinary medical practitioners know nothing better with which to treat the paralytic torpor of corporeal or mental organs, conjoined with unconsciousness, which prevails in many kinds of typhus, than the large doses of valerian. Do you know what is valerian? Valerian is one more remedy which is used in homeopathy also, and they used to use it in allopathy also. This is stimulant. So because this is one of the most powerful medicinal agents for causing animation and increasing the motor faculty. So this valerian, when given to the patient, he feels better, happy. The person who is in an apoplectic stage, in a congestive stage, in a paralytic stage, all of it becomes very happy, stimulant. It works. And what happens followed by that? Just see. Motor faculty, increasing the motor faculty. In their ignorance, however, they knew not that this action is only a primary action, and the organism after that is past most certainly falls back in the secondary antagonistic action into still greater stupor and immobility, that is to say, into the paralysis of mental and corporeal organs and death. They did not see that the very diseases they supplied most plentifully with the valerian, which is in such cases is oppositely acting antipathic remedy, most infallibly terminated fatally. And this happens very commonly. So this person dies because of the when the primary action vanishes, when the original condition reappears, it aggravates it comes in aggravated form, and person dies because of this. And this is very commonly you can observe in the patient. The old school physician rejoices. Rejoices means they becomes happy. The old school physician rejoices that he is able to reduce for the several hours the velocity of the small rapid pulse in a cachectic patients with the very first dose of uncombined purple foxglove. What is purple foxglove? It is nothing but the same remedy we used to use in our homeopathy. It is the digitalis. But in allopathy, they used to use it in the digoxin, lanoxin to control the pulse rate, which in its primary action makes the pulse slower. Its rapidity, however, soon returns, repeated, and now increases doses effect even an even smaller diminution of its rapidity, and at length none at all. Indeed, in the second reaction, the pulse become uncountable, sleep, appetite, and strain departs, and speedy death is invariably the result, or else insanity ensues. See, he is explaining one more example. The digoxin always used to produce such a thing. Digoxin, temporarily it relieves, it settles the heart rate. So if the person's pulse is 150, 160, and if you give digoxin, it immediately settles. But you have to go on giving the digoxin for longer period. And if you stop it, immediately it goes into the flutter. Person can enter into the ventricular tachycardia or ventricular flutter, and patient maybe land into the death. Or if it gets suppressed at that level, patient land into the insanity, that is madness. So it gets suppressed from there and enters into the mental faculty. So one more example of it he has given. So many more examples of the antipathic he has mentioned in this big aphorism, and which why he has given, he wants to explain you that there is always a palliation is followed by an aggravation. And to conclude paragraph, he writes that, and that is the most important inference of this. What he writes at the end of aphorism: how often, in one word, the disease is aggravated, or something even worse is effected by secondary action of such antagonistic, antipathic remedies, the old school, with its false theories, does not pursue, but the experience teaches it in a terrible manner. So, what experience teaches us? When you use the antipathic measure, there is always a palliation followed by an aggravation. So, this aphorism, biggest aphorism, related with the many examples of the antipathic measure. And all those examples were collected from the Upland journal. You can see over there in the footnote. He has mentioned White Upland in his pamphlet, Die Homeopathy. And many examples are mentioned. But these are the examples which are having a proof, which are very, very genuine. And that's why Hahnemann always gives the proof regarding all those things. I think we'll stop over here. Tomorrow we'll start with the aphorism number 60. Till that period, if you have any query, we can have a chat over regarding it. Otherwise, we can stop. Any question to anyone?
गुड इवनिंग सर।
गुड इवनिंग। आज लेट हो गए बहुत।
जस्ट बिल्कुल सर, वो हमारे जो पड़ोसी हैं उनके ब्लड प्रेशर हाई साइड पे चला गया था, वो इमरजेंसी में मेरे घर पे आ गए। अच्छा, वो बेसिकली शी इज अ सीपीआर पेशेंट। तो तो वो उन्होंने शायद मेडिसिन छोड़ दी थी फिर। अच्छा, उनके होता ही है सर कि जब उनके ब्लड प्रेशर 190 ऊपर का जाता है तो स्टार्टेड ब्लीडिंग फ्रॉम नोज, एंड शी इज ओवरवेट। तो फिर मैं गया और मैंने जाके जो है, वो टाइम कम था, तो मैंने उनको पहले सीपीआर 200 की एक डोज दे दी। और फिर उसके बाद में वहां पे रहा, और साथ में सर मैं क्रेटिगस ले गया था अपने क्यू में। क्रेटिगस क्यू,
क्या दिया था?
क्रेटिगस क्यू सर।
क्रेटिगस क्यू,
क्रेटिगस जी सर। लेकिन मैंने सर सीपीआर 200 उनके टंग पे दे दी थी जाके। और फिर आई वाज देयर फॉर 10 मिनट्स, और फिर उसमें मैंने देखा कि ब्लड प्रेशर उनका जो है, जो 190 पे था, इट केम टू 170 इन 10 मिनट्स ऑलमोस्ट। तो एंड शी सेड कि आई स्टार्ट फीलिंग बेटर। तो मुझे सर एक तो चीज ये पूछनी थी कि सीपीआर 200 में उसको रिपीटेड डोज तो नहीं उनको देनी है? एक से अगर उनका ब्लड प्रेशर अगर थम गया है तो फिर 30 में उसको हम कंटिन्यू करें?
You give it in LM in repeated. If she is a sepia only, you give it in LM in repeated doses. That will work better way.
राइट सर।
Daily one dose. It will be.
डेली 1 डोज।
हाँ,
सर सिस्टर को मैंने उनको 10 ml दे दी थी हिपरसल, 2 डोजेस। तो अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह आज उनको फीवर नहीं आया और शी इज मच बेटर। और तो अब उनको मजीद तो अभी मैंने 10 ml की डोजेस नहीं देनी है या सिर्फ 2
नहीं,
डोजेस देना?
नहीं. Now there is no need. If it has settled, there is no need.
राइट सर।
Okay. Chaitrali, your questions, I have read your questions. Yes, electricity and galvanism is advised. It is not advised by anyone. It has mentioned regarding all those measures at the end of book. Mesmerism, electricity and galvanism, or all those things, magnetism. He has mentioned those were the auxiliary measures. But here, these are not the measures which act as a curative. First important thing, it is not a curative. They are only palliative. If the palliation is needed, this is the thing which you have to do. And sometimes you require palliation. That part also comes when you learn the whole aphorisms. Then you will he explains, Hahnemann explains where there is a need to utilize the palliative measures. That will come in recent future. Within 2-3 lectures, we are coming to that point. He has not criticized, he has explained the truth, what happens after using the antipathic measure. So he has mentioned that it aggravates, it subdues, it settles temporarily, but it is followed by an aggravation. And when to use antipathic measures, that is a big footnote is there that we're going to learn in next 2-3 lectures. It will be there, so you will understand that. So instead of explaining it today, we'll learn that within 2-3 days. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Anything else? Any query, any question? Payal, what you have, sir? What size stone can be cured by homeopathy, and which stone cases we should avoid as beginners? Basically, Staghorn calculi, which is bigger than 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeter, 2 centimeters, big stones. So for beginners, it is one should not go for it. Second important thing, that if where it is, question is where the stone is. If it is there in the ureter and if it is blocked completely, and if you read the basically USG report and understand the USG report, that is more important. If there is a hydronephrosis and it has increased to such a level, it is a severe hydronephrosis associated with the cortical thinning, then it is the time that ask the patient to go for immediate operative. Because if the cortical thinning happens, the cortical degeneration happens, patient may land into the renal failure. That is not the time to utilize or try with homeopathic remedies. It is better to go for that. So first important thing, try to understand what the investigations you have done with the patient and correlate it and interpret it in a proper manner so that you can get the right idea whether to go for homeopathy or whether not to avoid the homeopathy. Okay. Anything else?
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Prasanna.
Sir, my son's case, sir, still the IV drips were going on and still he is constipated, sir. Not constipation, severe constipation. In the morning, I gave one plain water enema, sir. They have given laxatives, but no laxatives are working properly, I think.
It will not work. I will let you know the remedy tomorrow.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir, can I give him plain water enema, sir?
No need. Yeah, unless and until it is if it is troubling him, it's okay. If it is not troubling,
Sir, it is much troubling him. He is not able to eat anything, sir. That is what the problem.
Actually, he should start eating the roughest diet. That is more important. The green vegetables, roughest diet, that is important for him.
Now I'm giving only liquid diet, sir, at present.
No, then it will cause more constipation. You have to go to
Then if
Rakta.
he is not able to tolerate any solids, sir.
What happens if you give the solid?
He is vomiting.
Okay, I will let you know tomorrow. Call me at
Okay, sir.
around 10 o'clock.
Morning. Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
So thank you being there. We'll meet tomorrow with the next few aphorisms. Thanks a lot.